the third hour. In the second hour, and that's right now, I am honored to be joined by Hutton Gibson, and he's almost 85 years old. He's been well aware of the New World Order for 50 years. I've seen his son, Mel Gibson, on national news, on live shows, talk about how his father taught him about the New World Order. And I always love to talk to folks who have been aware of the New World Order longer than most of us have been alive. In many cases, longer than our parents have been alive. And Hutton Gibson, of course, was a railroad worker. He volunteered for World War II. He came back to the from the war and worked on the railroad. He then got into organic farming, and he then moved to Australia, and now has come back to the United States and lives in Texas, my state, where I hail from. And he's going to be with us for the next 58 minutes. Mr. Gibson, it's great to have you on the show today, sir.
I'm glad to be here. It's a great privilege.
Oh, no, it's a privilege to have you on, because I want to know how you raised 11 children and kept them out of the clutches of the New World Order. That right there is an incredible achievement in and of itself.
Well, I just told them that you don't believe what you read in the papers. You don't believe every newscast, radio or television. Of course, I caught on to that newspaper deal when I had a job where I had the middle of the day off, and I watched those Army McCarthy hearings, if you recall. And I watched him, and was very careful about what I saw and what I heard. And then I'd read the account in the next day's paper. And the only thing even similar were the names of the people involved. They just lied, they slanted, they biased. You know, who the devil is doing this and why? What's the purpose?
Well, we know the purpose, world government, and we'll talk about your view on the war. We'll talk about the biggest problem, the infiltration and control of the churches, period, Protestant and Catholic, worldwide. And we'll also get into the UN takeover, how the Masons tie into this. We'll get into your view of this current war with Iraq, the economy, and much more today. I also heard you talk about Prescott Bush. You know, Prescott Bush, Bush's grandfather, current president grandfather. You watched the McCarthy hearings. What happened every time McCarthy got into the fact that the government was controlling the communists? What would Prescott do?
Well, he would put out some statement and, you know, calling attention to the fact that McCarthy was all wrong. He was against him every step of the way. That's the only thing that made him notable. And whenever anyone asked Joe, hey, did you hear or see what Prescott Bush said about you? And he said, oh, he says, you mean Connecticut's mental midget.
I've seen those tapes. I didn't see them.
Invariably, that's what he said.
Yeah. Well, you know, Prescott was given the biggest fine up until that time, $1 million fine, for trading with the Nazis and running 53% of Nazi steel production through his outfit. And so we got the same thing today with George W. Bush, King George II. We're talking to Hutton Gibson. And, Mr. Gibson, we're going to break. We'll be right back in 3 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Guidance and help in this fight against the dehumanizing forces of the New World Order. We are joined by 84-year-old World War II volunteer veteran and, of course, father of the famous actor and patriot Mel Gibson, who's well-educated on the New World Order, one of the few outspoken voices nationally, internationally against this system, and we're honored to have a man who has incredible knowledge of the New World Order. Hutton, now I was reading an article from the Hollywood Reporter, and I don't know if this is accurate. You say I don't trust the mainstream media, obviously. Did you really win the big national championship on Jeopardy in 1968?
I did, but they sure have exaggerated the amount of money.
Well, no, I just wanted to give people an idea of how smart, I mean, I'm not trying to brag on you, but you really have a knowledge of facts and history. And if you have that, then the New World Order is obvious, isn't it?
It surely is. No denying it. It's there. As soon as you say plots, you're crazy, but things like this don't happen by accident. And even when I even brag about it and tell us they're going to give us a New World Order, I guess they figure we're too far gone to oppose them.
Would you say that we are in the final stages of a super tyranny, sir?
We're getting very close to it, yes. We're going to have to wake up in a hurry, do something.
Absolutely. You know, there's so many issues we talked about last night on the phone for 30 minutes. Let's start with the real root of the problem. The churches in America, both Protestant and Catholic, have turned into whores for the New World Order. They're now getting federal money. They're anti-gun. They're open border. They're pro-New World Order, from the Baptists to the Catholics. How has this happened in your 50-plus years of study of the New World Order, sir?
Well, it's been a takeover. In the Catholic case, it was Vatican II, called by that anti-pope, I have to call him, John the 23rd, good Pope John. The only pope in history ever praised by the Masons, or the first one at least, on his obituaries, which came years too late. That is to say, his obituary would have been better if it had been printed 10 years earlier.
And the government now wants to take over the churches and have them as mouthpieces. Bush announced on Monday his faith-based initiative for the occult New Age green groups. Does that concern you to see this one world environmental Gaia religion being promoted by Bush? Does that sound like something conservative to you?
I don't know. What are they conserving? Certainly not civilization. Certainly not religion. It's fantasy. That's all it is.
Did you hear that Greenland's cabinet just was dissolved for conducting satanic rituals publicly? That's the London Guardian. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't. Greenland?
It's getting more and more bizarre. Here's the headline: Cleansed Greenland cabinet falls. The Greenland government collapsed yesterday because of a row about a phenomenon associated more commonly with the medieval period than the 21st century, witchcraft. So I guess, you know, you're talking about this infiltration. In your study, how does Skull and Bones and all these other groups tie in to this destruction of the church in America?
Well, they're all in on it. As I say, the root of it is in Rome. And they simply follow the lead, pretend they're under obedience to somebody who has proven that he's not a pope. First, you've got to be a Catholic to be a pope. It's the first requirement. And we've had 4 in a row now that have no possibility of satisfying that requirement.
Well, the current pope, and I've got his statements, has said, I know a lot of conservative Catholic groups have criticized it vehemently, has said that we need a one-world religion, that all the religions worship the same God. That sounds like an Antichrist doctrine to me, Mr.
Exactly it. That's what they've been working toward. They take the most numerous church, one with the most adherents, and infiltrate it, take it over, and dilute its doctrines and its worship, to the point where anybody can join it without a qualm of conscience, because they found out one-world atheism doesn't work, so now they have to have a one-world religion. And when you come down to it, we're going to have a one-world ruler. And who's going to be the one-world ruler? The odds are pretty good it's going to be another one of these antipopes.
Amazing. Wars. You were a volunteer for World War II. Can you briefly tell us about your service there, and then even within the war woke up to the phoniness, and your view on this Iraq situation today? Can you break that down for us, Mr. Gibson?
Well, they did everything wrong, World War II. The first place, why was a fleet concentrated in Pearl Harbor? You wouldn't even do that in the palmiest days. The halcyon is okay. Then nothing's the matter. You wouldn't do it then. It's strategically unjustifiable. So then they had this war set up, and they got the fleet out of the way, and we couldn't go back and attack Japan. We had nothing over there, nothing in that region that would conduct a war, so we went to Europe. And We were headed for Europe long before that because Roosevelt had done a deal with the overage destroyers and given them to Britain. I think it was
Lend-lease.
Yeah, Lend-lease, but there's about 90 vessels of war. And on top of that, we had the 5th Infantry Division sitting in Iceland. So they could relieve British, so that they could go home and wait for us to come and invade the continent.
Meanwhile, the globalists funded Hitler and set him up and encouraged him with Neville Chamberlain, again, setting up these boogeymen. You also talk about how then, once we won the war, we divided it up with Stalin, who was at least as bad as Hitler. Your comments to that, Mr. Gibson?
I'd say he was far worse than Hitler. He had a fine record of murder. Millions and millions of people in the Soviet Union. What he did in Ukraine is inexcusable. And
what did you think when you read the papers and they were calling him Uncle Joe and how good he was?
I have a very strong stomach, so I didn't throw up all the time.
What are these wars really all about, Mr. Gibson?
Wiping out the flower of the youth, getting rid of the people that are ready to oppose any takeover, the people who can carry a gun and use it. That deal where Roosevelt came out in the middle of the war and said we will have nothing but unconditional surrender, that prolonged the war about 2 years. And thousands of people died on both sides every day for that. Well-headed, deliberate murder.
What do you think about the current situation? Iraq surrounded for 12 years, being bombed into submission. They told Saddam to invade Kuwait. He'd always followed his orders, attacking Iran, and with Turkey attacking the Kurds. He was given the spray planes by the U.S. government. Senate reports admit this in 94. Alphonse Tomato. They left Saddam in power in 91, so they had an excuse to encircle the country and commit genocide. Now, today, what do you think about the war with Iraq? What's that really all about?
Well, it seems to be set. We're going to war whether we want to or not. Every time they go in and find nothing, they get madder because he must have hidden it better. He's not all that bad. He had the country there with the most tolerance for Christians in the whole Arab world. And one of the things they did when they were bombing with these missiles and bombs that they could drop in your vest pocket, they bombed the only Catholic cathedral in all the Arab world.
Well, I know that. I also saw that Saddam bought all the Christian churches, pianos, and then it came out that Israel actually funded in 73 Hamas. They have been pushing and creating the radical Islamic groups to radicalize countries as a pretext to attack them. Have you come upon that information?
Yes, I see it. I'm not in a position to confirm it, but I've heard it.
It's amazing. It's just so you're aware of the Hegelian dialectic of problem-reaction-solution, aren't you?
Yes.
Creating a crisis to offer a solution. Can you speak to the Hegelian dialectic, Mr. Gibson?
Well, it's been put in practice by the communists for certain. What we call the communist compromise, where they they'll come in and grab your house and lot, property, and then they'll offer you your car back if you'll let them have the license plate. Good compromise.
Yeah. There was another example of that. A guy in New York who owned a auto glass store. He would go out and bust windshields at night so people come to him in the morning and get them replaced.
No, that was good, yes.
So that's kind of a problem-reaction solution system.
Yeah. But about this business with the 5th Infantry in Iceland occupying, the December 8th, my brother's first sergeant, he was there in the 10th Infantry Regiment, and he was sitting beside his bunk, and along comes the first sergeant and throws a silver star on his bunk. For what? That's that German plane you shot down 6 weeks ago. We weren't at war. We couldn't give you anything. So what were they doing there?
We're talking to